They say when a playwright cheats, she doesn't lie with her body first, she lies with her metaphors. Which would explain why I found a bottle of men's cologne tucked behind the cereal boxes, like a forgotten prop in a poorly directed kitchen scene. It wasn't mine, unless I developed a subconscious yearning to smell like sandalwood and rejection. And it wasn't hers either. She always said perfume was for women too insecure to smell like themselves. I found it while reaching for the cornflakes, 7:42 a.m., Monday morning, not exactly a time that screams betrayal, but apparently, infidelity doesn't wear a watch. The bottle was nearly full, expensive, French, and nestled so deliberately behind the granola that I half expected a stagehand to yell, "Cut," once I pulled it out. Jenna wasn't home. Of course, she was at rehearsal, which had recently become her euphemism for everything from not texting back to not existing. Now, to the untrained eye, this could have been an innocent oversight. Maybe she bought it for me and forgot. Maybe the milk also poured itself back into the fridge. But to someone like me, someone who spent decades analyzing dialogue for subtext, the symbolism was obvious. Something male had entered our domestic space, and it hadn't even tried to hide. It had just tucked itself slightly off stage, waiting for the next scene. I didn't confront her. I didn't pace the room or draft a speech or scream into the void. I set the bottle back where I found it and wrote one word on a post-it. Nice. Then I placed it on the bathroom mirror. Jenna loves symbols. She once wrote an entire act around a withering houseplant. So I figured she'd appreciate the gesture. When she got back that evening, she mentioned nothing. Not the post-it. Not the bottle. Not even the sudden disappearance of her copy of The Seagull, which I'd quietly borrowed and underlined passages about disillusionment and performance. That was the first signal, not the bottle itself, but her choice to ignore its exposure. That told me everything. She was already deep into the rewrite of our relationship and assumed I hadn't seen the new draft. That night, as she laughed too hard at her texts and left her phone screen down on the coffee table, I watched a rerun of a crime show and counted how many times the guilty party said, "I'm just tired lately." 12. I'd been married before. I'd seen lies come wrapped in passion, guilt, even tears. But this was different. Jenna wasn't cheating out of lust or confusion. She was doing it because she believed she was living a better version of herself, in some parallel scene, with someone who still mistook her impulsiveness for spontaneity. That kind of infidelity doesn't scream. It sighs. It edits. It buries the cologne behind the cereal and lets you find it, just to see if you'll play your part. I didn't. I never liked being directed. It didn't fall apart all at once. It peeled, like wallpaper in a house where the plumbing hums a little too loud at night. In the beginning, everything looked clean. Jenna still made coffee in the mornings, still hummed Sondheim in the shower, still kissed me on the cheek when she left for rehearsals. Our fridge was stocked, our bills paid, and there was no shouting, no slammed doors. If anything, we looked more stable than we ever had. But real collapse is subtle. It wears good lighting. She started going to the theater earlier than usual, staying later. At first, she said the lighting designer was anxious and needed more one-on-one time. I nodded. I understood anxiety. But then her explanations grew foggier, like plot points rushed in the second act. One night she came home talking about energy, not physical energy, but creative frequency alignment. I blinked. She poured wine and told me I might not understand, that the version of her I married was a chrysalis. Her word, not mine. You mean you're growing? I asked. She nodded, wide-eyed, as if I'd finally said something wise. Exactly, she said. And I need the space to complete the process. I tried to be supportive. I've always believed that marriage is less about possession and more about proximity, about standing beside someone without clipping their wings. But suddenly, her wings were flapping in rooms I wasn't invited into. She bought a vision board. Not just a little arts and crafts collage, but a 6-foot magnetic monstrosity that took up the entire wall in our guest room. I helped hang it. There were magazine cutouts of New York apartments, motivational quotes, and a photo of a man who looked suspiciously like her co-star, except his face had been replaced by a sun emoji. It's symbolic, she said. Don't read into it. I didn't. But later, I noticed our wedding photo, which used to sit on the mantel, had disappeared. I found it face down in a storage bin under the bed. The glass was cracked. She told me she was downsizing the decor. Minimalism is part of my process now, she said. But minimalism, it seemed, meant erasing me piece by piece. Her phone became a secret extension of herself. It had never been locked before. Now it had a passcode, Face ID, and a privacy screen filter that darkened it from side angles. She said she was just being more cautious. The industry's toxic, she told me. You never know who's watching. I didn't ask who they were. One afternoon, while cleaning out her car, a task she used to nag me about, I found a coffee cup from a downtown cafe she once told me she hated. There was lipstick on the lid. Not her color. She'd always worn deep red. This was a peachy nude, the kind her new stage character wore. A character she claimed she was channeling in real life for authenticity. I told myself she was method acting. I told myself a lot of things. She still smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile you give someone at a funeral, warm, distant, obligatory. Once, after dinner, she reached for my hand, held it for a moment, then let go as if she'd forgotten what to do with it. I tried not to panic. I told myself intimacy ebbs and flows. But at night, she began sleeping with her back to me, phone clutched to her chest like a diary. When I reached for her, she murmured, "Not now," and rolled further away. I asked if I'd done something wrong. She said I hadn't. "It's not about you," she whispered. "It's about expansion." Another word she'd picked up from her self-help podcast. She started talking like she was prepping for a TED Talk, bullet points, intentional pauses, buzzwords like growth, boundaries, alignment. But none of it included me. Her calendar was filled with meetings I wasn't told about. Her wardrobe changed too, younger, sharper, more off-book. She bought a leather jacket and said it made her feel unapologetic. I told her she looked amazing. She smiled and said, "I know. Not thank you. Just, I know." Then she walked out the door to rehearsal without looking back. I watched her leave, holding the doorframe like it might collapse. And still, I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I simply stood there, heart like a set piece waiting for its cue, wondering when exactly I'd stop being a part of the script. It happened on a Thursday, 11:18 p.m., while she thought I was asleep. She was in the next room, headphones on, laptop open, murmuring in that hushed, performative voice she uses when she's trying to sound thoughtful but seductive, like an actress in a low-budget indie film trying to win an award with subtext alone. The door wasn't fully closed, just cracked. The light bled out softly, slicing across the hallway in a slanted angle that hit me straight in the eyes when I got up to use the bathroom. I paused, not out of suspicion, but because of how strange her laughter sounded. It was too loud for headphones, too sincere. Jenna rarely laughed like that anymore, not with me. That brand of warm, bubbling delight hadn't surfaced between us in months. So I stood still, in the dark, barefoot on the cold tile, and I listened. "Stop," she giggled. "You're gonna make me say it again." Silence. Then, lower, intimate, "Okay, fine, you're brilliant. And yes, I'd pick you again in every life." A pause. "No, he's asleep. Don't worry, he doesn't get it. He thinks this play is about the character." Another laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, just dismissive, like I was a slow classmate she'd outgrown. I didn't breathe. My stomach didn't drop. It hardened. The kind of hard that metal gets when you cool it too fast. I didn't peek in. I didn't confront. I simply turned, walked back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for 11 full minutes. I don't know why I counted. Maybe to remind myself I was still in control of time, if nothing else. That call shattered something, not because it was romantic. I'd already known that part, in some dark, unspoken part of my brain, but because of how easy it was for her to erase me. Just like that. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a placeholder, a set piece she stepped around while performing her real life in secret. The man she was whispering to, I knew who it was now. Her co-star. The one with the faux philosophical Instagram captions and the overstyled hair. She once said he reminded her of youth, but I didn't realize she meant hers. The worst part wasn't even the words. It was the tone. That breezy tone women use when they've already buried you emotionally and are now discussing the weather above your grave. She called me he, not even my name. Just he. A prop. A mark on the stage. That's when it clicked. The whole relationship had become theater, and I wasn't just an extra, I was the wrong character. Cast in a role I never auditioned for, stuck in a scene I didn't write. And she thought I hadn't noticed. She thought I still believed the lines. That was her mistake. Because I write endings for a living. I understand structure. I understand how acts close. I lay back down. My body felt calm. My mind, not blank, but clear, like a dry eraser board waiting for the outline of something sharp. She came to bed 20 minutes later. I pretended to shift in my sleep. She smelled like citrus and someone else's ego. Her phone stayed under her pillow. She curled up, back to me, just like every other night, as if that call had been nothing but another warm-up exercise. I stared at the ceiling, lips parted just slightly, eyes dry. And in that silence, I didn't just decide to leave her. I decided to dismantle her. Not with yelling, not with threats, but with the one weapon I knew how to wield better than anyone: the truth, told as a story she couldn't control. That night, I didn't fall asleep. I rehearsed. I didn't need passwords or confrontation. I had patterns, and patterns always betray the truth. Jenna, like most people who consider themselves creative, was a creature of habit disguised as chaos. Her calendar was my first tool, not her actual one, which she kept password protected, but the one she left on the kitchen corkboard, the public version, curated like a social feed. I began comparing it to her shoes. Literally. On Tuesday, she claimed she had rehearsals all day, yet I noticed her ballet flats untouched by the front door, the ones she always wore for long sessions. Instead, her newer boots were missing, the ones with the tiny heels she swore were terrible for standing around in. So I made a note. Then I began checking the car's mileage. She'd always taken my Prius since it handled better, and she liked the tinted windows. What she didn't realize was that I'd kept a mileage log out of habit from when we used to itemize taxes. If she was driving 10 miles more than the round trip to the theater, it meant detours. So I plotted the excess distance against time and location and created a radius. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew how to triangulate. I didn't tell her I'd taken a day off from teaching. I simply told her I had an online guest lecture to give from the home office. Then I watched her leave, coffee in hand, scarf just a little too styled for rehearsal, and 15 minutes later, I followed from a parallel route. Not behind her. That would be obvious. I flanked her movements, driving with the slow patience of a man rearranging furniture in his mind. I parked near the perimeter of the rehearsal district and walked. She wasn't at the theater. She was 3 blocks down, in a corner cafe with minimalist lighting and just enough pretension to pass as artistic. She wasn't alone. Her co-star, now confirmed, sat across from her, both heads tilted inward, sharing earbuds, watching something on her laptop. I didn't take photos. I didn't need proof. I needed context. They weren't touching, but that meant nothing. Intimacy without contact is still betrayal when it lives in secret. She told me that afternoon she'd been practicing monologues. I asked her which one. She said, the one about grief. I told her it was a powerful scene. She smiled like she believed I hadn't seen her lie. That's when I planted the next trap. I asked if she wanted to practice lines that weekend, just the two of us, like old times. She agreed too quickly. That told me everything. If she'd been acting out of guilt, she would have hesitated. But this was performance. She was rehearsing for me, not with me. That weekend, I printed an older version of her script, not the current draft. I inserted a few fake lines, small ones, just enough to shift context. When we sat down to rehearse, she read them without blinking. No correction. No awareness that her own lines had been altered, which told me she hadn't opened the real script in days. Her rehearsal was happening elsewhere, in real time, with real emotion, for someone who wasn't me. I added another note to my file. Yes, I kept a file. Not on my computer. In my head. A mental outline divided into 3 acts: suspicion, confirmation, destruction. I was already well into Act 2. Next came the phone. Not hers. That was locked tighter than a vault. But she'd recently synced her music to the Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen. What she didn't realize was that the speaker had a memory function. Every device leaves a signature. Hers was labeled Jenna Theater Phone. Curious. She only had one phone, or so she said. That night while she showered, I activated the speaker's pairing memory and waited. 10 seconds in, a second device pinged. Not her iPhone. An Android. I didn't need to access it. Its presence confirmed the double life. She'd bought a burner, or, more cleverly, reactivated an old one, for her creative process. I turned off the speaker before it connected. The next day, I left a book on the counter, an obscure volume on narrative deception I used to teach. I marked a passage that read, "Lies always trip over continuity." When she saw it, she smiled, asked if I was prepping a lecture. I said yes. She didn't ask which class. That told me she hadn't been listening to anything I'd said in weeks. The distance wasn't emotional anymore, it was logistical. She was managing me the way a director handles a retired actor who still shows up on set. You humor them. You nod. You keep them away from the cameras. That's when I realized I didn't just want to catch her. I wanted her to catch herself. Publicly. Without knowing she was on stage. And so, I wrote. Quietly. Strategically. A new draft of her play. Same opening. Same characters. But by the final act, everything changed. I didn't need confrontation. I needed structure. She had her secrets. I had my script. And the curtain was already rising. She thought it was a celebration, a private table at La Fontaine, her favorite restaurant, the one with the overpriced scallops and the flickering candlelight that made aging actresses feel timeless. I told her the theater had offered me a last-minute commission, and I wanted her to be the first to hear the pitch. She arrived dressed like she was auditioning for herself, flowing silk, heels too high for comfort, lipstick one shade darker than guilt. I wore a blazer I hadn't touched in years and carried a flat black folder. She kissed me lightly, too lightly, like a diplomat greeting a foreign official. I asked the waiter to hold off on the wine. I said I wanted to toast with words first. She smiled and said, "You're such a romantic." I opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table. "Read that," I said. She did. Slowly. Her smile melted like wax under heat. The paper was the final monologue of her rewritten play, except it wasn't hers. It was mine. A scene I'd written, using phrases she'd whispered into her co-star's ear at that cafe 3 weeks ago, which I'd later overheard her parroting during rehearsal. Verbatim. My version twisted the monologue into a confessional, a woman unraveling on stage as her lies fall apart mid-performance. Jenna looked up, eyes flicking left, then right, scanning for a camera or a witness or a savior. "Where did you get this?" she asked. I said nothing. Just tilted my head slightly. "It's not what you think," she said. Classic opening act. It's just theater talk. You know how actors connect. I didn't blink. I was developing the character. You're a writer. You of all people should understand how immersive it gets. Justification. Next line in the script. If you'd been more emotionally available, maybe I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for creative validation. And there it was. Blame. Right on cue. I slowly pushed a second sheet of paper toward her, a printed screenshot of her second phone's device ID, connected to our Bluetooth speaker at 11:43 p.m. the night she said she'd fallen asleep reading. Her fingers twitched. Her lips tightened. "You've been spying on me?" she asked, voice sharp now, defensive. "No," I said, flatly. "I've been paying attention." Her face changed. That's when the fear crept in. Because she realized I hadn't just caught her. I had studied her. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't stormed out, hadn't even looked angry. And that unsettled her more than rage ever could. "This is sick," she hissed. "You're sick? Who memorizes Bluetooth addresses?" I smiled gently. "Someone who doesn't want to be lied to anymore." She scoffed, leaned back in her chair like a woman who thought she could still pivot, still charm her way out. "You're acting like I murdered someone." I folded the papers back into the folder and placed it beside my plate. "You didn't murder anyone," I said. "You just buried the life we built and wrote a one-woman show over the grave." She laughed thin, a brittle, forced sound meant to show indifference. "You know what? Maybe this is for the best. Maybe you needed a wake-up call. You've been stagnant. Safe. Predictable. I need someone who pushes me, inspires me. Mocking confidence. The final stage before collapse." "That's the problem, Jenna," I said. "You mistake stillness for weakness. But I've been watching. And writing. And in the story I'm telling now, you don't get the last word." Her mouth opened, closed. She looked down at her hands, then at the candle, then at the exit. I saw it, the quiet panic. The dawning understanding that this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a carefully directed scene in a script she never controlled. And we weren't done. Not yet. I picked up my fork. "Eat," I said. "It'll be a long night." The second we stepped into the house, she started unraveling. It was almost impressive, the speed with which she dropped the calm exterior and switched into performance mode, as if the restaurant had been Act 1 and now we were backstage, where she could rehearse destruction without an audience. "You smothered me," she hissed, tossing her bag onto the couch like it had betrayed her too. "You're always there, watching, breathing, judging, like a ghost with a spreadsheet." I said nothing. She paced. "This is your fault," she snapped. "You think you're clever, but you're cold. You don't feel anything. That's why I had to find it elsewhere. Emotion, passion, something alive." I unbuttoned my cuffs, rolled them neatly. "You were boring," she spat, voice rising. "I mean it. You sucked the air out of every room. You wanted life to be a table read, not a play." I looked at her, really looked, and she flinched, because there was no hate in my eyes. No rage. Just calculation. "Say something," she demanded. "Yell. Be a man, for once." I sat down, calmly. "You cheated because it was easy," I said. "You stayed because I made your life comfortable." And now you're angry because I made you look at it. Her jaw tightened. You were never really present. You lived in your head. You loved your books more than me. Books don't lie, I said. They don't sneak out and pretend it's about personal growth. She scoffed. You think you're above all this? You think your quiet act makes you noble? You're not special. You're just scared to feel. No, I replied. I'm just done pretending what you feel matters. That hit hard. She took a step back, then forward, like a pendulum looking for the right swing to hurt me. You're a coward, she said. This wouldn't have happened if you were a real man. I stood up, slow. And you wouldn't have needed someone else if you were a real woman. Silence. Thick. Ugly. Real. You used to worship me, she said, voice shaking. You said I was brilliant. You were, I replied. Until you decided lying made you more interesting. Her eyes darted, looking for anything that might still sting. I made you relevant, she snapped. Without me, you're just another lonely old man with a pen and a superiority complex. I nodded slightly. Then it's a shame you had to beg someone else to see you. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. You think this makes you powerful? Catching me? No, I said. Power is walking away without needing to explain why. She turned, slammed a cupboard, picked it up again. You think you've won. But you'll regret this. You'll wake up one day and realize you pushed away the only person who ever gave a damn. I tilted my head. Did you give a damn when you whispered to him that you'd pick him in every life? That stopped her cold. Her breath caught. You listened, no, I said. I remembered. She stood still, frozen, her performance glitching as she realized the script no longer worked. No tears came. No final line. She had nothing left to say that I hadn't already dissected. The woman who once choreographed every interaction like a dance was now stumbling through a silence she couldn't fill. And me? I felt nothing. Not victory. Not sadness. Just release. She was still in the fire. I was already outside, watching it burn from a safe, calculated distance. The beauty of a well-written ending is that every twist looks inevitable in hindsight, and so I planned mine with the same care I'd give a final act. No improvisation, no outbursts, just deliberate, devastating structure. While Jenna wandered through the wreckage of our last conversation pretending she still had time to pivot, I started quietly constructing her collapse. First, I gathered every digital breadcrumb, voice notes, photos, phone pings, mileage discrepancies, overlapping calendar lies, all logged, timestamped, backed up to a secure drive. I didn't need to humiliate her. I just needed truth, documented and indisputable. Then I locked down our finances. Not with brute force, with policy. I had already removed her as a secondary on the shared credit card months prior when she forgot to pay a hotel fee on accident. I rerouted the utility accounts into my name only and canceled the automatic payments that covered her separate phone plan. I didn't touch her money. I just made sure mine was no longer underwriting her affair. The car, my Prius, was registered in my name. So I reclaimed it without a word. Left a note and 2 bus passes in the driveway. For the journey, I wrote. While she was still clinging to the idea of rebuilding, I was scheduling appointments with a divorce mediator. Not a lawyer. A mediator. Quicker, cheaper, surgical. I offered terms so rational she'd look greedy if she declined them. She keeps her business assets. I keep the house. No alimony. No drama. Just division. Fair and clean, like a curtain drop. I sent the offer via email, subject line, closing night. But the masterpiece wasn't financial. It was theatrical. Poetic, even. I sent a revised version of her play, the one she'd been workshopping for months, to the director she'd pitched it to behind my back. Only this version was mine. Same title, same structure, but the characters now told a different story. A story of self-obsession, betrayal, and hollow ambition masquerading as art. I signed it with my name, legally, because most of the dialogue had come from her, just repurposed, reframed. Truth as fiction, fiction as truth. The director, a mutual acquaintance, wrote back within 48 hours. This is brilliant. I didn't know you were involved in the writing process. I wasn't. Until I was. Jenna had always loved having shared creative energy, so I gave her exactly that, just enough of her own voice to see herself twisted in it. I didn't stop there. I mailed a printed copy to her parents, the ones who funded her first theater program and still believed she was an emotional underdog. I included a handwritten note. Thought you'd want to see the version she didn't pitch. Her father replied 2 days later. If even half of this is true, I'm disappointed. I trusted her. No rage. Just a verdict. That one line was more destructive than anything I could have shouted. I didn't go near her coworkers. I didn't need to. One of them, a costume designer with whom I'd quietly kept cordial, asked me why Jenna hadn't shown up for a key rehearsal. I simply said, she's working on a solo performance now. Let the ambiguity rot from the inside. The final step? I erased myself from her future in real time. I canceled the anniversary trip she didn't know I'd already booked. I deleted the shared calendar, the cloud storage, the emergency contacts list. I replaced her emergency contact with my brother. I blocked her on every digital account, except email. Paper trail. Always. I boxed up the belongings she'd left scattered around the house, the clothes, the notebooks, the stage makeup she swore she only used for work, and had them delivered to her rehearsal space with a note that read, "End of act." No confrontation. No closure. Just execution. Clean. Unflinching. She still doesn't know the full extent of it. She's still spinning somewhere between denial and disbelief, assuming I'm brooding in silence while she recalibrates her script. But I'm not in the wings anymore. I'm not even in the building. The curtain has dropped. The theater's empty. And all that's left on stage is her, alone, out of lines, drowning in a monologue no one asked for. It was opening night. Not of the play she thought she was starring in, but of the reality she'd spent months trying to rewrite. I didn't say a word when she invited me. She still believed I was lost in the ruins of our marriage, holding on to hope like a fool holding a burnt script. I accepted the ticket with a quiet nod, told her I'd be there in the front row. And I was. Dressed in black. Calm. Still. Surrounded by faces she didn't realize had already been shown the truth, her parents in the second row, silent and stony, her best friend across the aisle clutching the program like a weapon. The director who'd received my version of the script sitting just close enough for her to feel the betrayal in his eyes. The theater was full. Her moment had come. And as the lights dimmed, I watched her walk on stage with the poise of someone who still believed the spotlight meant safety. But she didn't know, not yet, that the final draft she'd rehearsed wasn't the one that was being staged tonight. The tech team, loyal to the director, had loaded in new voice cues, new visuals, subtle shifts in lighting and sound that turned her proud monologues into something colder, emptier, more hollow. Her words echoed with irony. The lines she once whispered into her lover's ear now framed her character as a liar, poetic justice disguised as dialogue. At first, she didn't notice. She smiled, hit her marks, delivered her lines with the usual fervor. But then the audience started shifting. Uneasy laughter. Awkward coughs. Glances exchanged like knives in the dark. Her timing faltered. Her voice cracked. And then, the scene I'd engineered with surgical precision, where her character describes the man she's using to pay rent with affection, using the exact phrases she'd once used on me. Her father looked away. Her best friend's jaw tightened. Someone in the back gasped. Jenna paused, blinked. That wasn't the line she remembered. Her rhythm collapsed. She stumbled. She looked toward the director's booth like a child trying to signal a teacher for help. But there was no rescue. Only silence. She tried to ad-lib, to twist it. "It's all just theater," she said aloud, forcing a smile. "We all wear masks, right?" But her voice betrayed her. The wobble. The tremor. The first crack. And then the scene transitioned. Lights dimmed to blue, and the projector behind her displayed the final image. The monologue in text form, projected, word for word, and annotated with dates, private timestamps, and marginal notes pulled from the character's journal, a thinly veiled replica of the messages she'd sent from that second phone. Not vulgar. Not explicit. Just undeniable. The words, "He doesn't see me," illuminated the stage like a confession bathed in fire. Jenna froze. Her face fell apart. And in that single breath, every lie she'd curated collapsed into dust. Her mother turned her head. Her co-star, the man who'd whispered those same lines with her over coffee, stood in the wings, not moving. He didn't come out. He didn't acknowledge her. He left the building during intermission and never returned. Jenna tried to keep going. She cleared her throat. She lifted her chin. But it was too late. The audience had turned. Not cruelly. Just knowingly. Quiet judgment, the kind that sticks longer than any shouted insult. She got through the final act with trembling hands, eyes darting toward the edge of the stage, where I sat. Still. Watching. She couldn't look at me for more than a second at a time. But she kept checking, hoping for some sign of reaction. There was none. I didn't clap. I didn't move. I didn't need to. She bowed to silence. The applause came, scattered and weak, like rain tapping on an empty box. And as the lights rose, she caught my eyes one last time, and in that second, I watched her shatter. Not from guilt, but from the unbearable truth that I had been the one directing her downfall all along, and she never saw it coming. It happened in the lobby after the curtain fell, the crowd thick with whispers and sideways glances, everyone pretending to sip champagne while their eyes hunted for the real show, and Jenna, still in partial costume, makeup smudged from failure rather than design, walked straight into a wall of silence. Her parents were there, standing stiff by the column, her mother looking at the floor, her father with his arms crossed, lips pursed like he was holding back decades of disappointment. My sister was beside me, arms folded, already knowing what was about to come, and when Jenna saw me, she moved fast, as if urgency could rewrite reality. "What the hell was that?" she snapped, voice too loud for the room. I was starting to see who was watching. "You did this, didn't you? You rewrote it. You humiliated me." The crowd began to shift, subtle movements like sheep sensing a storm, and I stepped forward, calm but close enough for her to feel the gravity. "No, Jenna," I said. "You did this. I just stopped protecting you from it." She laughed, high and shrill, the kind of sound a drowning woman makes when she realizes no one's coming. "You're sick. You sabotaged my career because your ego couldn't handle being ignored." "No," I replied, voice firm. "I exposed what you already ruined. The lies. The messages. The affair. The way you used people like props and called it art." Her lover, or whatever he was now, appeared at the edge of the room, frozen like a man who just realized the building he's in is collapsing. Jenna turned, pointed at him. Tell them this wasn't real. Tell them this was all blown out of proportion." He didn't move. He didn't speak. He turned and left. Just like that. Cowardice in motion. Jenna spun back to me, eyes wide with fury. "You wanted to destroy me because you couldn't keep me. Because you're old and tired, and you never challenged me." I stepped in closer, each word like a nail. "No, Jenna. I wanted to walk away clean. You forced me to show them who you really are." And they believed it, because deep down, they already knew. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father turned away. My sister whispered, "This is brutal," but she didn't stop me. No one did. Jenna's voice cracked. "You never loved me. You loved control. You watched me suffer and said nothing." "I loved you," I said, louder now, for everyone to hear. "Enough to forgive the first lie. Enough to ignore the second. But not enough to sit through your one-woman tragedy pretending it was marriage." The room gasped. A camera phone lifted in the corner. Jenna's mascara was running now, lines streaking down her cheeks like stage blood. "You can't do this in front of them," she whispered. "Please." "I didn't," I said. "You did. Every word that exposed you came out of your mouth first. I just handed you a mirror and turned on the lights." She screamed in, not words, just rage. She shoved a table. Glass broke. Her mother reached for her, but Jenna slapped her hand away. "Don't touch me. You always took his side," she yelled. Her father stepped between them. "Enough," he said, cold and final. "We raised a daughter, not a disgrace." Jenna froze, mouth open, breath shallow, and the silence that followed was deeper than the first. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And in that stillness, she broke completely, sobbing now, knees buckling, someone behind her trying to offer a coat like it could cover shame. I turned, buttoned my jacket, and started walking. No dramatic exit. No applause. Just footsteps echoing over the shattered pieces of what she thought she could control. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The performance was over. The audience had seen the truth. And she would live in that spotlight alone. She moved out of the city within 6 weeks, not because of me. I never lifted a hand to stop her, but because the silence was louder than any accusation. Her name stopped appearing on the theater's website. Her next performance was canceled due to scheduling conflicts, though everyone knew the real reason was that no director wanted their show tied to the scandal of a woman who couldn't separate betrayal from performance. Her friends, the ones who used to tag her in wine night photos and post-opening night selfies, untagged themselves from her past. One by one, the hearts and likes vanished. Her parents returned to their quiet suburb. Their voicemail changed to a terse, "Please leave a message." But she told someone at a cafe, someone who told someone else, who eventually told me, that they hadn't spoken to her since the night she screamed in public and shattered whatever dignity they believed she had left. The man she left me for? He disappeared the second his name was whispered at a fundraiser as the one who wrecked the writer's marriage. He blocked her on every app, deleted his professional bio, and transferred theaters. She had nothing left but a suitcase of old playbills and a reputation that flinched every time someone said her name. I heard she tried to restart in a smaller town a few hours out, a little place where no one cared about urban drama, where she could be just another new face. She picked up work at a floral shop. They say she's quiet now. No monologues. No auditions. No laughter that fills the room. Just silence and small talk and eyes that avoid contact. But one night, a full 3 months after her fall, I heard a knock at my door. Soft. Unsteady. I opened it, and there she was. Thinner. Older somehow. Shoulders hunched like the world had finally weighed her down. She wore a long coat and no makeup. And for the first time in our entire history, she looked ordinary. She said my name like it still belonged to her. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, just a moment to speak. I didn't invite her in. I didn't need to. She stepped back from the threshold, like she already knew she wasn't welcome in the place she once called home. Her voice shook as she told me she missed the quiet, the routines, the man who listened more than he spoke. You were my anchor, she said, and I let the tide take me. I said nothing. She wiped her face and laughed. Not her old laugh, not the stage-ready one, but a hollow thing that collapsed halfway through. I still love you, she whispered. Every night, I wake up and I hate myself for how I left it. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman I married, but the stranger who'd stepped on stage and never stepped back. Strange, I said. I don't even remember your name anymore. She froze. Not from insult, but from recognition. That I meant it. That whatever she had destroyed, she could never rebuild. She turned and walked back to her car, shoulders trembling under the weight of everything she threw away, and I closed the door behind her like the final line in a script that should have ended long ago. Thank you for listening to my story. It was long, I know, but sometimes truth takes time. Where are you listening from? Did this one hit home? Let me know. I've got more stories, and they only get sharper from here.